c'est lo, c'est la. Join us on a rigorous step-by-step journey to fluency. I'm Timothy, and this is LearnCraft Spanish. In this episode, we'll go over some uses of Spanish pronouns that are nuanced but very important to master. Tiny words like lo, le, and se are very tricky, but there's no way around the fact that we need them in order to express ourselves clearly and accurately in Spanish. Plus, they're so tiny and spoken so quickly that understanding them when native speakers talk takes a lot of practice. So it's time to start making them second nature now. To begin with, let's review 3 of the memory palace scenes that we've used for pronouns. One for direct objects, one for indirect objects, and one for reflexive objects. In all 3 of these scenes, the words that we store are used right before a verb. For example, I have it is lo tengo, and that lo is from the direct object scene. To say I gave her a book, you say I le gave a book, and the le there is from the indirect object scene. And then I seat myself is I me seat, where me comes from the reflexive scene. Each of these 3 scenes seems to store very similar items. The words me, te, and nos are in all 3 scenes, though they mean different things in each scene. But the word lo, stored in the direct object scene, transforms to le in the indirect object scene for the sheep that lay down. And then it turns into se at the reflexive scene. And the word la goes through the same changes, le as an indirect object and se as a reflexive object. As a quick review, see if you can list all the words in each scene as we go through them, one by one, left to right. Remember to include the plurals when relevant. So, we'll start at the direct object scene. Can you list all of these words from memory? Try to say them before I do. On the left side, we have the words la for her and las for them. At the top of the picture, we have te. At the bottom, we have me and nos. And on the right side, we have lo and los for him and them. Now, the next scene where there's a fork in the road. On the left side, we have le and les. At the top, we have te. At the bottom, we have me and nos. And then on the right side, we have le and les. Now finally, the reflexive scene. On the left side, we have se. At the top, we have te. At the bottom, we have me and nos. And on the right side, we have se. The word se is unique because it doesn't change when there's more than one person. So to say she sees herself, you use she se sees. And if it's more than one person for they see themselves, it's also just they se see. In other words, se can be either singular or plural depending on the context. All right, now for the fun stuff. There are a couple of complicated things that happen with indirect objects that we'll go over today. Bear with me here because this will take both determination and imagination. But if you can get this, you can get anything in Spanish. So first of all, there's a special trick to using more than one of these pronouns at once. Now, when is that ever an issue? Let's use an English example. I gave it to you. So in this sentence, we have a direct object, it, which I'm giving to a recipient, you. It comes from the direct object scene, and to you here is an indirect object. Now, there's actually another way to say that sentence in English, although it's not quite as common. I gave you it. So ponder this sentence for a second. It's extremely valuable to us because it provides a glimpse into how Spanish is structured. As you can tell in this example, I gave you it. The recipient, you, comes before the object, it. In fact, if we replace the word you with other recipients, the structure stays the same. I gave them it. I gave her it, and so on. In each of these cases, there are only two words other than I gave, and the recipient always comes before the direct object. In Spanish, this is extremely important. Whenever you use words from more than one object scene, for example, an indirect object and a direct object, you always go backwards from the way that we learned these words. So you'll choose words moving back from the forked scene toward the scene with the hill and the hymns. So going back to our sentence, I gave you it. Here's how you would structure it in Spanish. I, you, it, gave, or yo te lo gave.
Yo te lo di.
So here, the word te is an indirect object from the crossroad scene, and lo is from the direct object scene. We went backward on our path, moving toward the hill instead of toward the stream. Here are some more sentences that use the same structure. They gave me it would be they me lo gave. You gave us her would be you nos la gave. Let's practice this with a mini quiz, and we'll focus on verbs that use direct and indirect objects, such as giving or telling. It's worth mentioning that a common Spanish word for stories is feminine, so there are a lot of feminine direct object pronouns. For example, he told me it, if it is a story, is he me la told. Also, as you quiz on these sentences here, don't worry about the other words in the sentence. Focus exclusively on the direct and indirect object pronouns. Sometimes there will be only one, but if there are two, remember to put the indirect object pronoun right before the direct object pronoun. In this first example, it is feminine. She is telling me it. She me la is telling.
Ella me la está contando.
In the next one, it is feminine. They gave it to us. They nos la gave.
Ellos nos la dieron.
I will give them something. I les will give something.
Yo les daré algo.
In the next one, it is masculine. They told it to us. They nos lo told.
Ellas nos lo dijeron.
In the next one, them is feminine. I'm telling you them. Te las, I'm telling.
Te las cuento.
In the next one, them is masculine. Are you giving me them? Me los, are you giving?
¿Me los das?
I'm asking her a question. Le, I'm asking a question.
Le estoy haciendo una pregunta.
In the next one, it is feminine. He gave it to you. Te la, he gave.
Te la dio.
It's about to get a little bit worse. So imagine that you want to say, I gave her it, where it is masculine. By default, this sentence should be, I her it gave, or I le lo gave. This fits the pattern of moving backwards from indirect to direct. Le lo. However, there's a problem. For some reason, the Spanish language really doesn't like the sound of that sentence. The words le lo together create a bit of a tongue twister with the L repeated. As a mnemonic, you might imagine that you're in the countryside and the local people singing hymns don't like it when you take the words le or les back to the hill. They prefer to have the singing there all to themselves. So the bottom line is that anytime you would say le lo or le la or anything like that, you should mispronounce it and change the word le to se instead. So for example, I gave her it is I se lo gave.
Yo se lo di.
And I gave him her is I se la gave.
Yo se la di.
This is super confusing, but here's how it works. The word here that looks and sounds like se is actually the word le. It just looks and sounds like se because of this strange pronunciation thing. It might help to think about it this way. The sheep that lay down, le, is also sometimes called se. But that only happens when you're moving backwards and using words that start with L in the next scene. Obviously, this is going to take some practice, so let's quiz with a few sentence examples. In each case, imagine yourself moving backwards from the crossroad scene to the direct object scene. But every time you would create the sound le lo, le la, les lo, les la, or any other combination of two L words, you'll change the indirect object to se. Okay, first example, it is masculine. I told him it. I se lo told.
Yo se lo dije.
In the next one, it is feminine. She told it to us. She nos la told.
Ella nos la contó.
In the next one, it is masculine. I did it to them. I se lo did.
Yo se lo hice.
In the next one, it is feminine. Will you tell it to her? Se la, will you tell?
¿Se la contarás?
In the next one, it is masculine. I would give it to you. Te lo, I would give.
Te lo daría.
In the next one, it is feminine. They will give it to me. They me la will give.
Ellas me la darán.
In the next one, it is masculine. They gave it to him. They se lo gave.
Ellos se lo dieron.
Let's talk about one more strange thing that often happens when you use indirect objects in Spanish. Consider this sentence. He asked her if she had something. Él le asked si tenía algo. The person being asked is her, represented by the word le, a word that's sometimes translated as to her. So she's the recipient of the question, and the question here is if she had something, or si tenía algo.
Él le preguntó si tenía algo.
Now, what if we wanted to clarify who that person is? For example, he asked his mother if she had something. In this new sentence, his mother is the indirect object in the sentence. Now, on the surface, it seems like we should phrase the sentence like this. He asked to his mother if she had something. Or, he asked a su mother si tenía algo. And the reason we do this is because we've replaced the indirect object pronoun with a noun. Since a su mother is in there as a noun, we don't need the pronoun le anymore, right? Well, that is how it works in English, but for some reason that's not actually how Spanish works. There's something really bizarre that happens, and I'll start by just showing you how this sentence would be. In proper Spanish, this is he le asked a su mother si tenía algo. So, wait a minute. What's the point of that le at the beginning? Literally, if you read this out, he to her asked to his mother if she had something. And yes, it's redundant. But unfortunately, this is one of the awkward rules in Spanish. If an indirect object is involved in a sentence at all, we pretty much always have to put the indirect pronoun before the verb, even if the object is also named as a noun afterwards. And personally, I endearingly call this the ridiculous redundant indirect object, or RRIO. So just remember that if a person or a thing is a named indirect object, you're still going to use le or les, even if you're naming the noun in the sentence somewhere else after the preposition a. And typically the a phrase goes toward the end of the sentence. As an example, I gave that to my friend is le I gave eso a mi amigo, where le is redundant with a mi amigo, even though they're on opposite ends of the sentence. Let's practice the ridiculous redundant indirect object, and we'll start with a step-by-step example. Let's use this sentence. I'll tell the girl that. So we're going to use to the girl or a la chica. But we also need le before tell. So we end up with I'll tell eso a la chica.
Yo le diré eso a la chica.
Try predicting as much as you can for the next few examples. In the first one, they is feminine. They gave Sofia many things. Ellas le gave muchas cosas a Sofía.
Ellas le dieron muchas cosas a Sofía.
In the next one, the friends are masculine. We told something to our friends. Nosotros les told algo a nuestros amigos.
Nosotros les dijimos algo a nuestros amigos.
He asked his friend if he had something. He asked a su amigo si tenía algo.
Le preguntó a su amigo si tenía algo.
All right, now how about this tricky one, where friend is feminine? We gave it to our friend. This seems like it should be we le lo gave a nuestra amiga. But as we just learned, we aren't allowed to say le lo. Instead, it's going to be se lo, even though the se there actually means le. So this is an example where se is being used as the ridiculous redundant indirect object. So we have nosotros se lo gave a nuestra amiga.
Nosotros se lo dimos a nuestra amiga.
To wrap up today's episode, let's quiz several more examples of the ridiculous redundant indirect object, along with a few examples of hacer from earlier this week. And then the rest of this week, we'll get more and more practice with this, along with learning some easier, more fun stuff. First example, I told my friends that I had to leave. I told a mis amigos que tenía que irme.
Les dije a mis amigos que tenía que irme.
In the next one, both them and my friends are feminine. I gave them to my friends. Se las I gave a mis amigas.
Se las di a mis amigas.
In the next one, it is masculine. I told you he gave me it. I told que me lo he gave.
Te dije que me lo dio.
In the next one, it is feminine. He was making it for us.
Nos la hacía. Nos la hacía.
In the next one, it is masculine. He is going to make us it that day.
Nos lo va a hacer ese día. Nos lo va a hacer ese día.
In the next one, them is feminine. He didn't give me them. No me las gave.
No me las dio.
In the next one, both it and the friends are masculine. I gave it to my friends this afternoon. Se lo I gave esta tarde a mis amigos.
Se lo di esta tarde a mis amigos.
She is going to make her friend something.
Le va a hacer algo a su amigo. Le va a hacer algo a su amigo.
In the next one, them is feminine. I already gave them to you. Ya te las I gave.
Ya te las di.
If you make that, we won't make it.
Si haces eso, nosotros no lo haremos.
In the next one, it is masculine. I told you it that day. Te lo I told ese día.
Te lo dije ese día.
You told the boys that. Les, you told eso a los chicos.
Les dijiste eso a los chicos.
Now you all are becoming good friends.
Ahora ustedes se hacen buenos amigos. Ahora ustedes se hacen buenos amigos.
In the next one, both them and my friend are masculine. She hopes that I make them for my friend. She hopes que se los haga a mi amigo.
Espera que se los haga a mi amigo.
I showed the man that. I showed eso al hombre.
Le mostré eso al hombre.
In the next one, it is feminine. She gave it to her son upon leaving. Se la she gave a su son al irse.
Se la dio a su hijo al irse.
In the next one, it is feminine. I will make it for you that year.
Te la haré ese año. Te la haré ese año.
Tomorrow we're going to take it a bit easier and learn some new nouns, including the words for idea, job, and trouble. This show is brought to you by LearnCraftSpanish.com. The Spanish voice in this episode was our coach Michael Agudelo. Our music was provided by the Seattle Marimba Quartet, and I'm Timothy, encouraging you to do the hard work of learning Spanish. Acquiring a second language is one of the most fulfilling things you can do, so start your fluency journey today at lcspodcast.com.